The Council of Galactic Harmony had not seen war in nearly 3,000 cycles. It had become a myth, a cultural footnote dismissed as primitive instinct. The galaxy had moved on. Peace was engineered, not negotiated. Conflicts were resolved through sanctioned discourse protocols, neural empathy linkages, and population-scale consensus simulators. The machines ensured fairness. The minds ensured compliance. So when the last remnants of an uncontacted species, humans, were discovered in the remote spiral of the Orion Arm, interest sparked like an old flame catching dry wood. "They've been isolated?" asked Chancellor Virnacool, her translucent tendrils twitching with curiosity. "No contact? No integration?" "None," said Arch-Scholar Tenev of the Information Continuum. "They refused all forms of neural link-up. Their transmissions ceased after first ping. Then nothing." "Were they hostile?" A pause. "Not overtly, but their silence is suspicious." The council convened. The galaxy's peace depended on coherence, and silence was the opposite of that. An expedition was sanctioned. Small, diplomatic, non-aggressive. A gesture of friendship, at least on paper. The scout ship Tessellate dropped into Sol space with silent gravitic folds, unnoticed by the system's aging surveillance satellites. Earth, once a beacon of noise and radio static, now pulsed with nothing. No broadcasts. No beacons. No calls. Just quiet. "It's empty," asked Velisk, the empath specialist, scanning the surface of Earth from orbit. No global communications grid. No life signals strong enough to mark as planetary civilization. The AI aboard the Tessellate, a wisdom core named Exile, spoke. "That is incorrect." It materialized a feed, infrared scans, radiation patterns, biosignatures. Underground cities. Subterranean power grids. Concealed orbital satellites, silent but awake. Not a dead world. A hidden one. "They're there," Exile said. "Watching." Velisk shivered. Why would a species hide from the galaxy? The diplomat of the mission, Trivan, leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Maybe they remember something we forgot." They landed a drone first, non-threatening, glowing with soft light and offering multilingual holograms of peace. It vanished within 0.7 seconds of touchdown. No explosion. No trace. Just gone. A second probe was deployed. It transmitted only one frame, a silhouette, humanoid, backlit by molten light and shrouded in smoke. Then blackout. "Cease transmissions," said Trivan. "Recall all external signals." "Why?" asked Velisk. "Because if they can detect probes this small, they can detect us. And I think they already have." A low-frequency pulse hit the ship, unregistered by any known galactic language. The hull of the Tessellate vibrated like a struck bell. No translation offered itself. It wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. Meanwhile, on Earth, beneath the ash clouds of a purposely ruined sky, Commander Alara Miles stood before a dark-paneled war table deep within the EarthCorps command. "They sent diplomats," she said, her voice a sharp line across the room. "Peace delegation," said the tech advisor beside her. Alara nodded. "Good. Let them believe we're the last to speak in violence." The others in the room, quiet figures dressed in matte black, each carrying the weight of dead continents in their eyes, didn't cheer. They didn't speak. Alara activated a holomap. It showed 1,000 red markers stretching through the stars. "Deploy the silence protocols. Start phase 1. A low chime acknowledged the order. On cue, dormant satellites reawakened. Ghost fleets stirred from asteroid shadows. The forgotten parts of human history, those never written into textbooks, began to uncoil from the deep. Back aboard the Tessellate, Velisk spoke quietly. "They are different. I feel nothing from them. Like they've shielded their minds from empathy link." Trivan stared at the Earth through the viewport. "Not shielded. Trained. Conditioned. We're not dealing with primitives. We're dealing with a species that saw the galaxy's peace and decided it was a lie." He turned to the others. "And now they've come back with something else." The council had expected to meet words, ideals, culture. What they had instead was silence, heavy, deliberate silence. And, in that silence, something was coming. Something prepared. Something human. The tessellate drifted closer to Earth's moon, its engines powering down to minimize detection. The crew remained in an eerie, anticipatory silence. No one spoke. Every member of the crew felt the weight of the strange, unshakable tension that had gripped them ever since they had entered this star system. It wasn't the kind of silence a diplomat expected. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the stillness before a storm. Velisk had been trying to decipher the strange pulse that had rattled their ship earlier. The data was a strange mix of harmonics, a message not meant for words, but for feelings. A pulse of warning. An instinctual signal, alien to all known languages. They're preparing something, Velisk muttered, staring at the data streams as they tried to interpret the pulse. We don't know what it is, but it's not a welcome. Trivan stood behind him, arms folded, watching the Earth's moon through the viewport. He could feel the unease in the air, the creeping dread gnawing at his own composure. There had been no diplomatic signals, no requests for communication, no outreach. We need to contact the Council, Trivan said, his voice low, but firm. Tell them we need reinforcements. We need to leave now. Before Velisk could respond, the sensors began to beep wildly. The atmosphere in the control room shifted. Something was moving fast. A sharp flash appeared on the scanners. Something big. Something fast. Coming directly toward them. Energy signatures rising, Velisk shouted. Hands flying across the console. We're being targeted. Shields now. But there was no time. A brilliant beam of intense light struck the tessellate, not from the planet, but from the asteroid belt, where there should have been nothing but rocks. The ship's hull shuddered violently as the energy beam ripped through the shields and scorched the outer layers. Sparks flew across the control room. Return fire. Trivan shouted. Impossible, Velisk gasped. We don't have enough power left after that blast. Shields are at 30%. A low growl reverberated from the ship's deep core. The tessellate was losing its energy reserves fast, unable to fight back. Whatever the humans had activated, whatever hidden weapon they had buried in the asteroid belt, it was overwhelming. The beam struck again, and this time the tessellate's communications array exploded in a violent burst of flames. The crew was thrown to the floor as the ship lurched sideways. Through the broken communications panel, a distorted voice came through the static. Leave, it commanded flat and cold. You are not welcome here. Trivan's eyes widened in realization. They're not sending a message, he whispered, horrified. They're sending a warning. Back on Earth, Commander Alara Miles stood in her command center, gazing at a live feed from the tessellate's communications relay. She watched the helpless crew of the diplomatic ship scrambling to react to the onslaught of energy pulses. But she didn't feel satisfaction or victory. The silence in the room was thick with purpose, with inevitability. Phase 1 is complete, she said softly, as the last of the tessellate's transmissions flickered out. The ship was still intact, for now, but it would be a long time before they could recover. Long enough for Alara to send her message, if necessary. She turned to her aides. Prepare the next phase. Target the fleet now in orbit. We need to send a signal no one will ignore. The crew of the tessellate had barely enough time to recover before the first wave of human vessels came into view. These ships weren't sleek or diplomatic in design. They were jagged, brutish, designed for one thing only, war. A vast formation of massive vessels, their outlines shifting and contorting in the dim light of space, arrived in the tessellate's path. They appeared to be covered in layers of alien materials, twisted alloys that no one in the galaxy had ever encountered before. They've been hiding this, Trivan muttered. For how long? Velisk stood next to him, eyes wide. We should have never come here. They weren't trying to keep us away. They were preparing for us. Just then, the space around them cracked with sudden energy. It wasn't just a pulse. It was a full, concentrated assault. The human warships unleashed a volley of weaponized beams, so advanced and so powerful that the tessellate's shield integrity dropped to 0 in seconds. Brace for impact. Velisk shouted, but it was already too late. The tessellate trembled under the weight of the assault. Its hull screeched, groaning under the pressure of the barrage. Outside, the moon of Earth, once a peaceful sentinel in the cold vastness of space, now became a backdrop to a cosmic conflict. Humanity's first strike against the galaxy's peace. Shields are gone. Engines are failing, Velisk said, panic creeping into his voice. We're losing control. Trivan turned to the crew, his expression unreadable, but his voice steady. If we survive this, we'll have to warn the others. Humanity isn't here for peace. They're here for something far worse. The tessellate lurched again, spiraling toward the gravitational pull of Earth. And, as it fell, another message came through the static. We are the last of the silent ones, the voice said again, colder this time, almost like an echo of some forgotten past. And we will make you understand. The tessellate spiraled toward Earth, its trajectory doomed. The crew scrambled in a desperate bid to regain control of the vessel, but the damage was too severe. Systems flickered in and out of life. Shields were shattered, and power was dwindling. The only thing left was a cold, harsh silence of space, broken only by the occasional mechanical groan of a dying ship. Inside the bridge, Velisk and Trivan clung to their stations, the weight of their failure pressing down on them. We're not going to make it, Velisk said, his voice a strained whisper. Not like this. Trivan gritted his teeth, ignoring the desperation creeping into his chest. No, we will make it. He forced himself to focus, his eyes flicking across the holographic displays, trying to find a way out of this nightmare. Then, in a moment of clarity, he saw it, an emergency beacon deep in the ship's command center. A faint, almost forgotten signal, one meant for exactly this kind of situation. Velisk, get to the beacon. We can still send a distress signal, but we need to do it manually. Velisk's eyes widened with realization. The distress beacon? But the core's nearly dead. The communications array was fried during the initial strike. There's a backup, Trivan insisted, moving quickly toward the far side of the bridge. If we can get it powered, we might be able to send one last transmission before we... Another blast rocked the ship, throwing them both to the ground. The sparks shot from the exposed wiring, and the main lights flickered out. We don't have time, Velisk gasped. The humans will. A deep, rumbling sound came from outside the ship. A low, almost imperceptible hum. Then a voice, one that sounded like it came from the very heart of the universe itself, pierced the silence. This is your final warning. Trivan froze, his hand resting on the console, eyes wide with disbelief. What was that? The voice came again, this time clearer, more commanding. Humanity's war begins now. The silence is over, and we are coming for you. The entire bridge shook as if the very fabric of reality was warping in response. The crew held on to whatever they could, their minds reeling. It wasn't just a battle. It was an invasion. The humans had something far more terrifying than technology, something ancient, something primal. Suddenly, the communications panel blared to life. A new transmission flooded through. It was an image, a grainy, blurry video feed, but the voice that accompanied it made the blood in their veins run cold. We are the last of silence. You have woken us. Ilara's face appeared on the screen, her expression calm, cold, and utterly unyielding. This is Commander Ilara Miles of Earth Command. The war is inevitable. Our time in the shadows is over. We are coming for you, and the galaxy will understand. The tessellate crashed, a fireball of twisted metal and shredded hull, into Earth's atmosphere. The crew had barely managed to activate the emergency beacon, sending their final message, one that would echo across the galaxy. But it was too little, too late. Earth had already made its move. The Galactic Council erupted in chaos. We must respond immediately. Chancellor Virnakul's voice trembled with fury, her tendrils twitching erratically. They've attacked one of our own, and they've declared war on the entire galaxy. Tenev of the Information Continuum leaned forward, his skeletal fingers pressing against his data console. This is no mere attack. It's a statement. It's a declaration of supremacy. Trivan's voice cut through the debate, his face appearing on a holographic feed. He was barely holding it together, his breath ragged. The humans have turned their war against us. The Tessellate, we've lost everything. They've begun a war wrapped in silence, and it's only just beginning. The council fell into stunned silence. We've made a grave mistake, said Virnacool, her voice low, thoughtful. We believed peace was the natural state. We forgot that some species thrive on conflict. We thought humanity would fall in line with the rest of us, but they've been preparing for this, waiting for it. The room shifted uneasily, as if each delegate felt the icy hand of inevitability reaching over them. The humans were not merely hostile, they were unpredictable. They had survived in a universe where peace reigned because they had found ways to bend it to their will, to hide their true potential until the perfect moment. And now, that moment had come. Back on Earth, Commander Alara stood in the shadows of a war room, the holographic map of the galaxy now filled with pulsing red dots. Each one marked a target. Every world that had once been part of the peaceful, unified galaxy was now on humanity's list. Their silence had ended. Their wars had begun. Phase 2 is ready, a technician said quietly, approaching Alara with an updated report. All warships are in position. The first strike is aimed at the belt of Asteris. We'll make our move on the frontier world next. Alara nodded, her expression unwavering. Good. Let them think this is just a skirmish. We've been waiting for this moment for millennia. The galaxy's peace was built on the bones of war, and now, humanity will show them what true power is. She turned her gaze to the stars, her mind already calculating their next move. The war was only just beginning, and the galaxy had no idea what it had just unleashed. The galaxy trembled as humanity's presence rippled through the cosmos, shattering the illusion of peace that had hung over it for millennia. Systems once united under the banner of galactic harmony now faced a new, chilling truth. There was no negotiating with silence. Humanity had broken through the veil, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Tessellate's destruction had been only the first spark in a chain reaction. Alara Miles's message had been received across the stars, a harbinger of what was to come. The Council of Galactic Harmony had convened in emergency session, but it was already too late. The peaceful alliance that had held the galaxy together was crumbling. We have underestimated them, Chancellor Virnacool muttered, his voice barely audible in the charged air of the council chamber. His face, usually calm and composed, was now drawn and tired, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a star's gravity. We believed they were nothing but primitive, war-weary beings. But humanity has been preparing for this. Preparing for war, Arch-Scholar Tenev added, the usual quiet of his voice broken by a rare edge of alarm. Not just any war, but one without warning, without compassion. One they can win by the very act of silence. How could we have missed this? The holographic projection of the galaxy shimmered before them, now marked with dozens of flashing red beacons, signatures of humanity's warships, as they drifted closer to contested systems. No words, no demands, just the cold, relentless march of a species that had come from the shadows to reignite the fires of conflict. The question is, Trivan's voice interrupted the chamber's heated discussions. What do they want? His face was a mask of disbelief. He had seen the silent warships firsthand, those jagged metallic behemoths that cut through space with terrifying speed, cloaked in weapons and technology that defied any known logic. He had felt the chilling embrace of their energy pulses. There was something ancient about their design, something that whispered of a time when the galaxy was young, and wars were fought with brutal simplicity. They want more than victory, Trivan continued. They want control, not of territory, but of us. On Earth, Alara stood in the heart of the command center, watching the progress of the war unfold in real time. The last of the diplomatic protocols had been discarded, replaced by a cold, mechanical efficiency. Humanity had always been good at surviving, but now they were learning how to dominate. Their ships moved silently through the dark expanse, striking quickly and without mercy. The peacekeepers of the galaxy were caught off guard, their fleet scattered and disorganized. Phase 2 has begun, Ilara said, her voice devoid of emotion. The belt of Asteris is lost. We're hitting the frontier worlds next. The war room hummed with activity as technicians updated her with new intelligence. The human war machine was efficient, devastating. Each attack was measured, each strike designed not just to cripple the enemy, but to break their spirit. There was no surrender in this war. There was only annihilation. "You've underestimated them, Commander," one of her officers said, his voice tinged with admiration. "The speed of our strikes. It's almost like they didn't see it coming." "They didn't," Ilara replied, her eyes narrowing as she studied the holographic map. "Because we let them think we were weak. They thought silence was strength. But the truth is, they never understood what humanity is capable of." The officer nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology. It was their ability to adapt, to learn, to fight when the odds were against them. The galaxy had forgotten that. And now they would learn. In the outer reaches of the galaxy, the first signs of panic were beginning to surface. A fleet of peacekeepers, led by the venerable Terran diplomat Valerax, had ventured toward the outskirts of the human-occupied territories, hoping to establish contact. But they were met with silence. "We have to warn the others," Valerax said, pacing in his ship's command center, his brow furrowed in concern. "They will be next if we don't act." His crew remained silent, staring at the endless stretch of stars before them. "They're coming," one of his officers said quietly, pointing to the sensors that were picking up a new wave of human ships. Their movements were almost imperceptible, their methods untraceable. Valerax had no doubt they were preparing for another strike. "They are already here," Valerax replied grimly. "And if we don't act fast, the entire sector will be swallowed by their silence." Back on Earth, Ilara received reports from the front lines. Humanity was winning, but at a cost. The galaxy was not without its own defenses. The first peacekeeper fleets had begun to muster a defense, assembling in the outer rim of the solar system. It wouldn't be long before they reached Earth's borders. But Ilara was ready. She knew what the galaxy's peacekeepers had forgotten. Humanity didn't fight wars the way others did. They fought with a mind for strategy, for psychology. And every single one of the galaxy's defenders was now a target. Humanity wasn't interested in simply defeating them. They were interested in breaking their will. "We'll show them," Ilara muttered to herself, her fingers brushing over the holographic map. "What true war is." As the human forces pushed forward, the galaxy's peacekeepers scrambled to assemble a counter-strategy. But the more they learned, the less they understood. The silence that had once been a metaphor for peace now became their worst nightmare. Every move they made seemed to be anticipated. Every defensive position was a trap. The humans had no interest in conventional tactics. They fought with the mind, with the silence of the void, and the ruthlessness of a species that had been pushed to the brink. The galaxy was beginning to realize the truth. Humanity wasn't just a species of war. They were a species that understood war itself. And the galaxy had no idea what kind of war it was now engaged in. "Prepare Phase 3, Ilara ordered, her voice calm cold. "The galaxy will learn what happens when you bring war wrapped in silence." The war had only just begun. The galaxy was in turmoil. Humanity's war machine had crossed the point of no return. What had started as a single, silent attack against a lone diplomatic ship had become a sprawling conflict that engulfed the farthest reaches of the galaxy. The peace that had reigned for centuries was but a fragile memory now, as the galaxy's vast and diverse civilizations tried, hopelessly, to contend with the wrath of humanity. Every battle left a scar. Every world touched by humanity's reach bore the mark of war. But what made this war different, what made it unrelenting, was the way it was fought. There were no speeches, no declarations of purpose, only the cold silence of humanity's determination and the terrifying precision with which they struck. On the front lines of the belt of Asteris, a coalition of peacekeeper fleets gathered in a last-ditch effort to defend the galactic borders. Under the command of Velarax, they had built a defensive line, an intricate web of fleets that spanned the system, prepared for the worst. The worst arrived sooner than they had expected. Shields at 75% and falling, one of Velarax's officers reported, her voice tight with panic. They're pushing us back again. Velarax stood at the command center, watching the holographic map that projected humanity's forces moving forward with unnatural synchronicity. His eyes narrowed as the dots representing human ships blinked across the map like a venomous swarm, each pulse of light a reminder of how rapidly the tide was turning. "What are they?" the officer asked, her voice shaking. "How are they doing this?" "They are doing it," Velarax replied, his voice quiet but resolute. "Because they've learned the language of war, and we have forgotten it. They weren't just fighting a war of ships and soldiers. Humanity was waging a war of influence, of will. Each fleet they destroyed, each planet they razed, was a calculated step toward something greater, something they had been preparing for, perhaps, for centuries. It was a war of isolation, of breaking down the very fabric of unity. They're trying to fracture us," Velarax whispered to himself, "trying to turn us against each other." Back on Earth, the war was no longer abstract. It had become personal. Ilara Miles stood on the balcony of the command center, watching as the holographic displays continued to track humanity's triumphs. Every new report of a peacekeeper fleet crushed beneath the relentless assault felt like a step closer to their ultimate goal. And yet, despite the victory, there was no joy in her heart, no satisfaction. This was not a conquest of territory, nor a war for resources. It was a war for the soul of the galaxy, a war for control over the narrative, for the right to define what peace really meant. "Ilara," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was the voice of her second-in-command, an officer named Jorik, who had stood beside her through every phase of the war. She turned, her gaze hardening. "Yes, Jorik." The peacekeepers, they'd begun negotiating for ceasefire terms. Her lips curled into a small, humorless smile. "It's too late for that." "But the council is desperate," Jorik pressed. "They know they've lost, but they're hoping for terms. They want a chance to rebuild, to prevent further destruction. And we're supposed to just stop?" Ilara's eyes narrowed as she turned back to the map of the galaxy. "They don't understand. This isn't about rebuilding. It's about teaching them. Humanity is not here for a peace that exists in the absence of conflict. We've seen what that leads to, an artificial harmony built on fear." She looked at Jorik, her expression hardening. "We will finish this. There is no negotiating with peace." In the halls of the Galactic Council, chaos reigned. The news of humanity's continued advance had spread like wildfire. Some factions were still hopeful that a ceasefire could be brokered, while others, those who had been hit hardest by humanity's attacks, were calling for full retaliation. The unity that had once defined the Council was now a distant memory, replaced by bitter infighting and desperate measures. "Humanity must be stopped now," bellowed one of the delegates, his voice trembling with rage. "They've turned our peace into ashes. We can't let them continue this. We must strike back." "We cannot afford to," Chancellor Virnakul countered, his voice surprisingly calm in the face of such fury. "Their methods are unpredictable. We've never encountered anything like it. But we cannot simply wait for them to take everything," another delegate cried. "They're pushing us to the brink of collapse. The entire galaxy will be at their mercy." "You don't understand," Triben interjected, his voice cutting through the noise. "This is not about mercy. This is about power." The room fell into a tense silence as all eyes turned to him. "What do you mean?" Virnakul asked, his voice filled with cautious curiosity. "I mean that humanity does not fight to conquer. They fight to rewrite the rules," Triben said, his eyes steely. "They don't just win battles. They win the war by changing the very fabric of what war is." He stepped forward, his voice growing more intense. "And they've already won. The only question left is whether we'll accept that or fight to the last." On the battlefield, humanity's forces were already assembling for the final push. The peacekeepers had lost the will to resist. They fought with desperation, But it was clear that the tide had turned. Humanity's warships, brutal and efficient, swept through the stars with terrifying precision. And then, as if to prove that the galaxy had underestimated humanity's strength, Ilara's voice rang out across every frequency. "Let it be known," she said, her voice carrying over the comms to every corner of the galaxy. "This war was never about destruction. This war was about understanding. You have failed to understand us. And now you will understand what it means to face a force that does not fight by your rules." Humanity was ready for the final song of war, and it was a song that would echo through the stars for eons to come. The war that had raged across the galaxy was nearing its apex. Systems burned, planets fell, and alliances shattered as humanity's war machine moved inexorably toward its goal. There was no more discussion in the Galactic Council chambers. There was no more hope for diplomacy. The galaxy was on the brink, and everyone knew it. Peace, that fragile and fleeting dream, was lost. Ilara Miles stood in the heart of Earth's command center, surrounded by data streams and holographic displays showing the culmination of their victory. The galaxy, once a beacon of unity, was now a fractured landscape of ruin. The galaxy's peacekeepers had fallen back, retreating to the farthest reaches of their former territories, trying to regroup, but they were already too far behind. "We've broken them, Commander," Jorik said, standing beside her. His voice was low, reverent. There was no gloating, no celebration. "The Council is in disarray. There's no coordinated resistance left. The galaxy is ours." Ilara nodded slowly, her eyes distant, unfocused, as she watched the galaxy map before her. "It's almost over," she said quietly, her voice filled with a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. "But I can't shake the feeling that we've lost something we'll never get back." Jorik gave her a puzzled look. "What do you mean?" "We've won. We're the most powerful force in the galaxy now." "Power doesn't mean victory," Ilara replied, her gaze still fixed on the hologram. "What we've done is reshape the galaxy, yes, but at what cost? The unity, the peace we destroyed. We're going to be the only ones left standing. And I don't know if that's a victory worth celebrating." Her voice trailed off, and she turned away from the map, her eyes narrowing as if searching for something in the shadows of the room. Jorik noticed her sudden stillness, the way her shoulders tensed. "Commander," he began, his tone hesitant, "do you think there was a way we could have avoided this? A way we could have kept the peace?" Ilara paused. "No," she said, her voice firm but tinged with the bitter edge of experience. "They never understood us. They thought we were like them, weak, passive. But we had something they didn't, the ability to adapt, to change. The galaxy saw peace as the only way forward. But humanity, we saw something else. We saw war as the key to true strength." In the vast reaches of space, the last of the peacekeeper fleets gathered for their final stand. It was a desperate attempt to stem the tide of humanity's advance, but they knew it was futile. Velarax, leader of the remaining fleets, stood aboard his flagship, watching as humanity's warships gathered for the final assault. His eyes, once filled with the resolve of a diplomat, now burned with the fire of a commander in a losing battle. "Prepare the ships," Velarax ordered, his voice hoarse. "We may not survive this, but we will fight with everything we have." The officers around him nodded grimly, each of them aware that their only choice was to fight, because surrender was no longer an option. The silence of the galaxy's peace was dead. It had been murdered by humanity's fury, and now there would be no more compromises. "We can still make them listen," one of his officers said, hope flickering weakly in his voice. "No," Velarax replied. "This isn't about listening anymore. It's about surviving." Back in the depths of Earth's command center, Ilara stood once more before the holographic map. Her hand hovered over the controls, ready to issue the final orders for humanity's sweeping victory. The fleets were in place, and the enemy was beaten, scattered, desperate. It was time to deliver the final blow, the one that would leave no doubt as to who now ruled the galaxy. But something stopped her. She had fought for this moment, had driven her forces toward it without hesitation. And yet, in the quiet of this room, Amidst the chaos of the war, Ilara found herself questioning the cost of their victory. "Commander," Jorik's voice broke through her thoughts. "It's time." Ilara turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Is it?" Jorik was taken aback by her tone. "Of course it is. We've won. We've crushed them. They're defeated." "No," Ilara said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "We've broken them. But the war isn't just about defeating the enemy. It's about what comes after. What happens when you're left with nothing but the silence of victory?" Jorik's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, Commander?" Ilara's gaze hardened, and she turned back to the map of the galaxy. The blinking lights, the beacons of the worlds they had conquered, seemed like distant stars now, trapped in the cold, unfeeling void. Humanity had won, but the victory felt hollow. The silence, once a tool of war, now felt like an emptiness that echoed through her very soul. "We will never be the same again," she murmured, her hand clenched tightly around the control panel. "The galaxy will never be the same." Elsewhere, as humanity's final strike began, the peacekeeper fleet scattered in the face of annihilation. Velarax's flagship fell silent, and his crew stood at attention, awaiting their fate. They knew it was over. The silence of the galaxy had been shattered, and there was no going back. In the heart of the human fleet, Ilara's voice rang out, her final orders echoing across the warships. "Let them remember, we are the silence. We are the storm. And when we speak, the galaxy listens." And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the war ceased. The fleets of humanity halted their advance, the galaxy now their dominion. The peacekeepers who remained, broken and scattered, would never be the same. But neither would humanity. They had been changed by the fire of war, and in the ashes of their enemies' defeat, they found the true cost of their victory. The silence was gone. The war had reshaped the galaxy, and humanity, wrapped in its silence, stood alone at the edge of the stars, waiting for the next challenge to come. End.